Welcome. My name is Victoria here, but I'm often better known as Mrs. Humanities. I'm a teacher, subject leader, and professional tutor. I'm talking today about managing a wellbeing and workload. I personally found the early years of my career in teaching a real challenge. In fact, for the first four, I really struggled with the workload, which impacted my wellbeing and mental health. Eventually, I burnt out in April 2016 and went through a breakdown which almost led me to leave the profession. I decided, though, to give one more school a try, and several years later, I'm still here. Since 2016, I've been exploring ways to manage and reduce workload. I've written a lot about my experiences with burnout and mental health, and have written my own book, Making It as a Teacher, How to Survive and Thrive the First 5 Years, in which I share a wide variety of time-saving and workload-reducing strategies, such as those that follow. I hope that by the end of this, you will feel empowered to take charge of your workload and prioritise your well-being. Being a teacher is really fulfilling. It's an ever-changing career that inspires and educates. But it's also exhausting, mentally and physically. As an early career teacher, you are learning and developing. You'll be lesson planning, assessing work, and managing behaviour. On top of that, you'll be constantly learning new theory and ideas that you can apply to your practice, whilst also maybe trying to manage your life at home and time with your family and friends. This alone is challenging for any early career teacher. Add in a pandemic, frequent changes, and the impacts of isolation and separation from loved ones, it would be no surprise if you might be finding things hard or difficult at times. Early career teachers are constantly juggling an incredible amount. However, if you're not careful, it is really easy to reach burnout before the end of the school year. Burnout is the result of long-term work-related stress that leads to exhaustion and the inability to function effectively. Along with it comes an array of mental, physical, and behavioural characteristics. However, you can avoid this, but being proactive here is essential. One of the things I find most important is time management. It's essential that you consider your time and manage it carefully. As teachers, we must remember that we are only human and there is only so much we can do in the time that we have. You need to make sure that you balance both your work and your own lives, whilst also fitting in time for rest and relaxation. Throughout the school year, workload fluctuates. At times, you might feel like everything is left to the last moment, that you're taking each day at a time. And that's okay. As you gain experience, you will learn to look beyond the day or week ahead. Some of the following will help to ensure that you can fit you time into the week. You can do this by considering time as fixed or flexible. I discovered this when I read The Confident Teacher by Alex Quigley. Fixed time. This is the time you have little to no control over how you spend this. It could be that you're teaching lessons, attending meetings, undertaking training. Whereas flexible time is time that you can use as you wish. Alongside time categorization, I've also found that prioritizing has been an essential skill to develop. I started this by using the Eisenhower matrix, which has been a really useful tool in evaluating the importance and urgency of tasks. Using the matrix, it has helped me to prioritise tasks that must be done, that can be scheduled for a later date, that can be delegated to somebody else, or simply deleted from the to-do list. To make this work, however, you will need to admit defeat and accept that you simply cannot do everything without it having an impact on your time somewhere else. It doesn't take long to plan and prioritise how you will spend the time that you've put into your flexible category, but it's worthwhile to give you more time somewhere else. I find that doing this at the very end of a school day helps me to leave school ready for the next day, and it stops me worrying overnight. I really like the phrase time strict, and I have this little saying that goes with it. In order to make yourself time rich, you need to be time strict. What this means is that you set yourself working limits and strict time frames for tasks. For instance, in my early career days, I could literally spend hours trying to find the right resource. And ultimately, I'd normally end up making it myself. These days, I set myself time limits, usually 10 minutes, to search for a resource. And if I don't find it in that time, I then assume that it doesn't exist and I get on with creating what I had in mind. I then also give myself a time frame to complete that task, usually about 30 minutes. This stops me from striving for perfection and thinking about the presentation of my resource. By doing so, I'm able to keep things simple, avoid overcomplexity, and make the learning the central focus. Ultimately, this provides me with more time for other things. If you don't already do this, try and set yourself a routine for weekdays and weekends. As part of that routine building, consider when are you most productive and work around this if you can. If, for instance, by 7 p.m. you find yourself lagging, could you perhaps adapt your sleep routine and wake up slightly earlier if you actually find you're more productive in the mornings? It's also important that within your routine, you find time between being awake, working, and sleeping for things that you enjoy and that will keep you physically and mentally healthy. Try to plan and arrange things with friends and family and make sure they're booked into the calendar. That way then, you're less likely to forget or decide not to participate. You may like to pause here and take a moment to reflect and discuss. When I think about the advice that I was given whilst I was training, I always wish that someone had said it like it is. That they'd told me that there are things that you need to recognise and acknowledge early on. So, I'm going to do it for you. I wish someone had said that you need to acknowledge that the to-do list will never be completed. This is why prioritising your time is so important. To ensure that the things that are urgent and vital get done. I wish someone had said that you need to acknowledge that teaching is a job. Don't turn it into a lifestyle. Honestly, in my early career days, I thought that being a teacher essentially defined who you were. I thought of it as a lifestyle, and therefore I was a teacher before anything else. And I probably learned the hard way that it is only a job, an important one, but it really shouldn't control your life. Thinking this way required a complete change of mindset, but realising this helped me to better manage my workload, control my working hours, and improve my well-being. I wish someone had said that you need to acknowledge and appreciate that teaching is hard work, and that it is okay if you struggle with it. I also wish that someone said that speaking up isn't a sign of weakness or a sign of failure, and that saying you are finding teaching hard takes strength. If you are finding that you're waking into the early hours of the morning, getting up unusually early, working what feels like 24/7, it's okay for you to speak to someone and to ask for advice and support. You are not alone. Later on in the profession, it's okay if you can't do things beyond what is contracted of you. You just have to say, sorry, I can't do that. When you want the best for those around you, it can be really hard to say no to the things that you're being asked to do that might be beyond your normal job. But consider the impact, the time, and how that may influence your well-being and self-care. You may like to pause here and take a moment to reflect and discuss. Initially, as you're learning and developing, the workload can feel immense. Let's look at some ways of managing this. I love this phrase, less is more. Reason being, in my early career days, many a time I would find a resource or an activity that I liked and I planned the lesson around it. I tried to find a way to make it fit the scheme of work or lesson objective. My lessons would be jam-packed with numerous activities, and each time they'd require me to stop the students, explain the new task, and then get them started. I'd be battling with getting their attention, waiting for silence, checking they understood, ensuring they were all on task, and before I knew it, I was trying to move them on to the next thing. There was never really the opportunity for students to deeply engage. It wasn't until I became a head of department that I realised the value of less is more. Learning isn't about the activities, it's about the content. By thinking in this way, my teaching has been simplified. Instead of lots of engaging interactive learning activities, I opt for one main learning route which develops in complexity through the lesson. I'm always thinking, what do my students need to know and do at the end of the lesson, at the end of the topic, the key stage, and the school year? Whilst as an early career teacher, this can be much harder to do without that experience of a whole school year, but you can begin by ensuring that before planning any lessons, you sit down with your mentor and really explore the objectives of the entire scheme of work. Then, when you plan your lessons, consider how anything you do leads to the intended outcomes for the topic. By thinking of it as planning the learning rather than planning individual lessons, you'll begin to plan the small steps to the final destination. Where possible, try to make use of the resources available to you. It's okay if you don't plan from scratch and instead you use someone else's resources as a starting point. Edit and adapt them to suit your style. Perhaps try one learning strategy of your own each lesson and base the remainder of the lesson on what is available from the department or from online resources. However, remember to be time strict if you are searching for something. If you don't find a suitable resource in the time that you have given yourself, crack on and make your own. Teacher training encourages you to be a reflective practitioner. And once you've been teaching a couple of years, you'll find that you naturally refine, revise, and reuse your resources. As an early career teacher, you can start doing this immediately though. When you use a learning strategy that you find works well for you, refine and revise it by trying it a few times with different classes and different content. Then, when you're happy with it, make a blank template ready for later reuse and add it to a template bank. Reason being, this then saves you time searching through your resources for when you last used it. And you have a set of go-to effective strategies that you've tried and tested. It also means that if you are using similar activities and applying them to different content, students require less explanation of what to do each time they return to the strategy. And when it comes to workload, it's really important that you remember that good is good enough. If you try to be outstanding 100% of the time, it will result in burnout. But if you're consistently good and thus demonstrating quality teaching and good standards of practice that inspire, challenge, and promote positive learning, then that makes you an exceptional teacher in the long run. You may like to pause here and take a moment to reflect and discuss. Let's move on to well-being. Well-being is essential. It's really important that we look after ourselves in order to be able to provide the best possible learning experience for our students. Make time to check in with yourself. Strategies such as mindfulness, meditation, and journaling can be helpful, as well as talking to others or even yourself. When I reached a state of burnout, I didn't recognise it for over a year later. I really wish that I'd learnt much earlier on how to recognise stress. Having an awareness and understanding of stress, anxiety, and mental health is invaluable to understanding yourself. Since learning about burnout, the symptoms and the consequences, I've become far more aware of what is going on in my head, and therefore can ensure I take a step back as and when I need to, without the immense guilt that I used to feel. It's important that you take the time to learn about you and take time to check in before you need it. If you want to perform well in the classroom, you have to spend time refueling by explicitly taking time to look after your health and well-being. Take time in the week to do the things that you enjoy. That could be spending time with family and friends, getting outside and enjoying the natural world, or curling up on the sofa with a good book. Try to plan your holidays and weekends in advance. That way then you're not tempted to just work through them. Ensure you give yourself a break and try to find somebody that can hold you accountable to make sure that you are looking after yourself. If you are struggling at any point, whether as a trainee, an early career teacher, or further down the line, whatever the reason, reach out and talk to others, whether it be family and friends or a colleague. I cannot express the importance of this. Sometimes, though, it can be hard to speak to the people that you are close to or those that you work with. And when those times occur, there is an organisation that is dedicated to supporting the well-being and mental health of teachers and those working in the education sector. They're called Education Support, and I'm really proud to be one of their ambassadors. Speaking to them when I broke down in my 4th year really helped me to find the confidence to seek the professional help that I needed. If I hadn't spoken to them, I know that I wouldn't be in teaching now, so I have a lot to thank them for. On the following slide is a short video to give you insight into this fantastic organisation. You may like to pause here and take a moment to reflect and discuss. I really hope that you have found this session useful and empowering. And going forward, you will have the confidence to take charge of your workload and your well-being. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to get in contact.